Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps out my channel a lot, so I appreciate that. Um, I also love it when people leave comments, so if you have a question or constructive criticism, if you have an idea for a video, or if you just want to tell me how you do things, which is always interesting to me, I love those kind of comments. So I have this really pretty kind of almost a 10 millimeter green tourmaline that I picked up at the last show I went to, and it's kind of a light green color. It's not as like dark green and hard to see through as a lot. It's got a really nice transparency to it. So I think it'll make for it's also got a lot of sparkle to it, so I think it's going to be pretty. It's about almost 3 carats, and it's a round brilliant, so I think it'll make a good centerpiece for a nice bracelet. And the kind of bracelet I'm going to make today is sort of abstract and wavy, and I'm going to try and create some bands that are interesting for it, and we'll see how that turns out. But I have some ideas, and I may alter them as I go a little bit if I don't like how it's turning out. Before we get too much further, I need to thank some groups of people. My patrons over on Patreon are my core group of supporters, and they have created this really great community full of a whole bunch of talented people who are really willing to share their ideas and what they know how to do, and it's just a good community. So I have 3 new ones who just signed up. I have Margaret, John B., and Lou. So thank you all for signing up. I really appreciate you becoming supporters, and I hope that you find it as pleasant and as helpful over there as I do. So I think you'll like it. The other group is my YouTube subscribers, and we made another benchmark. We passed 17,000 subscribers, which is amazing. Thank you for that. I so appreciate the nice comments. You guys are just a nice group of people, and I really do appreciate that. I also appreciate the super thanks, and the buy me a coffee really helps with the cost of materials right now since it's gone up so much. So thank you for that. All right, well, let's give this bracelet a try. These are a couple of my design idea books that are available on my merch store if you're interested. The more recent ones, I started putting some useful charts on the back. This one has American wire gauge to inches to millimeters, which I think people overseas might find useful. This one has conversions between fractions of an inch to decimals to millimeters, which I use this one all the time. And this is actually the book that I'm currently using to sketch up my designs. So I'm going to have to dig out a new one pretty soon. There we go. Okay, this drawing looks a little bit weird. So, and that's because I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to shape this side over here. But let me show you the tourmaline that I have. It's very pretty. Make sure you can see that okay. I think it's about a 9.5 millimeter. So I'm going to bezel set it on this one. But because it's a deep stone, I don't want very much bezel. I don't want it to be a really tall bezel. So I'm going to create kind of a cone shape out of round, probably 14 gauge wire and successively bigger rings. So it kind of creates a little bit of a round pyramid to raise it up a bit. I think that'll be kind of a nice way to surround it. That'll also make the diameter of the head of the bracelet here a little bit bigger, which is kind of what I wanted. The wires that I'm going to use here are going to be 8 gauge half round, which is going to be this part in the middle. There's going to be 18 gauge round wire soldered as a border and as a divider between the two. So, so it's going to have basically five layers: 18 gauge round, 8 gauge half round, 18 gauge round, 8 gauge half round, 18 gauge round, like that. But I can't just solder it along the entire length. There's multiple pieces here, so I'm going to have to piece it together kind of. And the idea here is this is going to be a bracelet that sits on the wrist at an angle like this. So I want this one to be kind of facing this way, like that, and this projecting piece will kind of keep it from scooting forward on this side, and hopefully it'll look like it just kind of smooth, kind of flowy bracelet, but we'll see. I'm going to taper these in over here, and it's going to use quite a bit of material. I pre-cut some of these I decided to segment it into 3 pieces to do this. Right here where it comes together and joins the outside of this little platform I'm going to create will be the start of one of these pieces that goes around over to here. And that came out to be about 245 millimeters. This piece here was 110 millimeters, which I just erased because I altered it a little bit. And this piece was 225 millimeters that goes from here all the way around here up to there. And so I've cut those pieces in advance. Before we get started on these wires, let's make our bezel and everything. So I'm using 26 gauge bezel, which is 0.41 millimeters if I remember right. Oops. And although this is tall, 3/16 of an inch or 4.76 millimeter tall bezel, I'm going to be cutting it down quite a bit probably, or filing it down. So, and I think what I'll do is I'll take some 18 gauge wire and make a little jump ring that fits right inside of it to create a little step for our girdle to sit on. And then I'll start building these things around it to create a raised platform to deal with the pavilion of the stone. So at this stage it kind of looks sort of clunky, but I have a feeling when it's 3-dimensional and it's shaped around your wrist it's going to look better. But there's only one way to really find out for sure. I want to do this stone justice because it's a pretty stone. Alright, let's make a little scratch. Really appreciate all of those people who've bought the new ebook. I've sold quite a few copies already. This, if you haven't heard of that, if you're new here, each year I make a compilation ebook that includes links to all of my videos from YouTube as well as Patreon. Although in order to view the Patreon ones you have to have a Patreon membership. But included in the book are pictures and a picture of my sketch, list of materials, difficulty rating, notes that I made about the project, and a link right to the video. So if you're interested in checking that out, it's up there. You can actually get both 2023s and 2024s in one package and save $5 if you're interested. It's a good way to have a whole bunch of projects right at your fingertips if you need some inspiration. But thank you to those who bought it. Okay, it's interesting when I look back when we're compiling all of that stuff over the whole year. It's three videos a week. It ends up being 156 just from YouTube, plus, you know, another 15 or 20 from Patreon, maybe closer to 20, I think. And it makes me think about all of the hours I spent editing videos and stuff. It's quite a bit of time. Okay, if you've never been to my channel before, I use hard silver sheet solder primarily. I use liquid flux that I dribble on with one of these dropper bottles. My torch is a Silversmith model. It's their acetylene air torch. It's plenty hot for silversmithing, and I think it's one of the better torches for that. And I use a #1 tip, and that's the most frequent questions that I get. Occasionally get questions about these cutters too. These are just Fisker's craft shears. I sort of abuse them by what I'm doing with them here, and so they wear out after a while. Is there an organization you report tool abuse to? Because I should be reported, because I abuse those cutters all the time. OSHA maybe. Just doing a little reshaping. I got a little excess space, so I'm going to cut a little piece out and resolder it. I think that's a little better. I need to make a little ring that sits on the inside of it. Normally I'd put a couple of layers if I was creating a step bezel like this, but since I'm going to be creating a kind of a raised platform for it out of 14 gauge round wire, I think we can get by with just one layer because the pavilion will be raised up by that platform. So. Make sure it's sitting down flat, and we'll solder that on there. The easiest way to do this usually is to put a few pieces in kind of a circle, flux this and set it right on top of it, and then just heat the whole thing. So we'll do that. Then we're going to add a ring made out of 14 gauge after that on the outside. Then we'll make a slightly bigger one that'll stick out a little more, so kind of plop that on top of that. We'll try to do it symmetrically. Okay, let's find some 14 gauge round. So I need to make one that fits snugly around this. You don't want it to fit loosely because then when you go to solder it on, it will be uneven, the solder seam. When I'm doing these kind of things, if I want them really tight, I'll normally I'd leave a little extra, but I'm going to mark it pretty close to right where they come together. So I have to kind of really, maybe even file the inside of this to get it to fit in there nicely. Get a little better finish on it then. Let's solder that and see how it looks. I do something called pick soldering, where I pick up a little bit of solder on the end of this and place it where I want it to go. It's a really useful skill. If you're interested, I'll put a link up there for a video. Okay, at this point I got some waviness again, so I need to work that out of there. So I've got it laying down flat. Right, so let's solder that on. Then we can start adding gradually increasing wings. I want to get it to solder on there where it stays straight. So there's likely enough solder on there, but I'm going to sweat a little bit on top of this so that it has some already pre-existing. Sweat soldering is where you pre-melt some solder where you want it to be before you put your other piece on there. Here goes nothing. I had a little problem. It slumped in the middle a little bit, and so I went ahead and I recreated it, and then on this last layer to prevent it from sliding in at all, I put a crossbar down there that would hold that central part up a little bit and soldered it in. I'll just cut that out later on after I do this. But the other thing I did was I kind of tapered this to a point. This is the 225 millimeter one that's going to go right here, up to about there. And so I'm going to, I don't know if I said this in the video earlier, but I'm going to hammer these so they have kind of a texture to them. And so I'm going to do that next on this one, and then we're going to solder, I think, this 18 gauge wire on it on the outside, and then we'll see where we go from there. It's a good way to get rid of all that angst you're keeping inside right now. As well as being decorative. Okay, I'm going to spend a little time trying to get this straight again. At least relatively so. So I think I'm going to anneal this to make this a little easier to bend. Okay. Initially I was going to solder the extra wire on the outside first, but I think that's going to make it even harder to bend, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of shape this, and then we'll solder it on. So about right here is to start curving. I'm going to try and twist on you to make it easier to bend, but you have to kind of control that. Okay, I need some 18 gauge right now. I cut myself a pretty good sized piece here. I'm going to try and tack it in one spot, and then we'll be able to manipulate it more easily, I think. Well, let's give it a try. I'm going to try and tack it right along there, and then we'll do some bending to get it to lay better. try and get it tacked over here, and then I'll mess with that to get it lined up better. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's kind of what I was shooting for there. So I'm going to go ahead and make the other side over here, but I'm going to do it pretty much the same way I did before, so I'm not going to make you watch me do the same thing twice. But then we'll assemble it all in a few. So I'll be right back. This one took quite a bit longer than this one because I had some fancy stuff to do, since it has to kind of taper into this one, and tapers on both ends on this one. So I think my next step is, I've got these pretty much filed to about where they need to be. I think I need to solder these together, and then I think we're going to put this in here. I think this is going to be kind of an advanced project anyway, just because of the sheer precision soldering, precision filing, and just the amount of time that it takes to get it up to where you want it to be. Let's see what we can do. Again, this is going to take a lot of heat. So I think in order, because it broke when I bent it, and I was afraid of that because sometimes if you don't have a good solid place where it's going to get some tension and flexing, you can have that problem. But I'm going to solder this to the underside of that a little bit, so it just kind of flows right in there, and I think that'll also make it stronger. But I did a little bit of playing with the geometry of it to see if it would lay the way I wanted it to. So let's cut some fresh solder. Kind of like that. It's not resting quite as diagonal as I wanted it to. Okay, well I'm going to let that pickle and then I'll play with some configurations and we'll see how it turns out. Okay, I got things polished up. I'm going to set this stone, but there's a couple of spots where it didn't maintain the texturing that I'd like, so I'm going to see if I can Okay, let's set that stone. I've already filed this down to about the right height. Bezel's been thinned out a little bit at the top. And I do this a little differently than some people do. I use the flat side of my chain nose pliers here to kind of work as a bezel pusher. Try and keep that sitting nice and flat. Once you feel it's in there, then I'm going to use the rounded outer part to kind of burnish the top. Once you have it set, then I just need to take some pictures and put them at the end. This kind of sits kind of like that on the wrist. So, and I guess I could play with the geometry of it a little bit. I was hoping it would sit a little bit more slanted like that, but it's not quite sitting that way. I kind of like it. It's got a little bit of a sparkle to it because of the hammering. So it catches the eye. Gives it a little more antique-y look. Alright, well, I'll get some better pictures and put them at the end. Okay, well that was the abstract tourmaline bracelet. I'm not sure what we're going to call this one yet, so we'll just call it that for now. If you enjoyed the video, why don't you hit the like button for me? That really helps to get my channel promoted. As I said before, I'd love to have you leave a comment. I'd also love it if you go check out my main channel page. I have 425-ish videos now, so I've been doing this for about 3 years at 3 per week. So there's tons of content over there, and I'm sure there's some other stuff that you'll find useful if you enjoyed this one. So check it out. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. There's also some links in the video description down below that are important. If you want to get that ebook I mentioned earlier, that's available there. Those design idea books that I draw my sketches up in, those are available on the merch store, and there's a link there in the description. And there's a link to Patreon if you want to check that out too. So thank you for coming. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch my video. Take care. Happy silversmithing.